Hi, my name is Michael Bartlett, Metaphysical Astrologer, and I want to talk to you today about one of the important shifts that's going to be occurring in the next year, 2023. It's actually a generational shift. If you've been noticing that a lot of things have just been a little wonky lately, a little odd, things that you think are going to be going a certain way don't quite work out the way that you think they are. Well, we're kind of like in an in-between phase. We're in a phase between the switching of the planet Pluto, which many people want to consider to be called a dwarf planet. But in astrology, it actually still has very strong bearing on what is going on because it actually packs a powerful punch in astrology. We find that wherever it is placed in the chart that people tend to notice it's going on. So what's happening is Pluto's been in the sign of Capricorn for the last while and is about to go into the sign of Aquarius. Key concepts for the planet Pluto include the great and terrible simplification, also known as the transformer or about transformation. It's often what we consider to be a remover of that which no longer serves you. One of the key words and key ideas here when we have Pluto transiting in our personal charts and making big changes is the idea of surrender, understanding that there is something greater going on than just what we have in our own minds. And that which lies buried beneath or deeply within. Pluto rules the riches that lie underground, like oil and gemstones and gold, metals, and is really the death of attachments, which is really about releasing the ego. I like this card for death, the tarot card death. It's, it really means a big change. It's something that's going to be happening that is going to be bringing you down basically to your bare minimums. Now, when I talk about Pluto, it's really important to understand that they basically, wherever Pluto is, when it switches into signs, it basically denotes a generation of people. So what we're going to start back with early on, there are still some individuals still on the planet when Pluto was in the sign of the Cancer. It went into Cancer back in September 11th of 1912 and went back out October 21st, 1912 in the sign of Gemini. It was in there for 25 years beforehand. I mean, sorry, it's in 25 years in the sign of Cancer. It went back into Cancer in July of 1913. Then in 1937, it went into Pluto. And as you can see, there's usually this period where Pluto will retrograde back in. I like to consider it being like two sides of, like beginnings and endings, or a lot of different polarity sort of things. So if we think of the sign before and the sign after as being kind of very different ways of looking and being in the world. But Pluto's going back and forth between these signs. What I like to think is that it's like Pluto's kind of stitching these ideas. So there's a little bit of an overlap going on. We'll be having the same experience when Pluto goes into Aquarius in 2023. So in Pluto went into Leo in 1937, stayed in there for 19 years. And in 1956, went into the sign of Virgo for 15 years, went into the sign of Libra for 12 years, the sign of Scorpio for 12 years, 1983, into Sagittarius for 13 years, starting in 1995. I'm not going to read all these dates. You can pause your screen and take a look at them, as well as look at an ephemeris if you want to look at any of this information as well. Went into Capricorn in 2008, which is where we currently are. Went back into Sagittarius for a little bit, 2008, from June until November. Was there for 15 years and is now going to be going into Aquarius March 24th. Then we'll go back out from Aquarius back into Capricorn on June 12th. Then we'll basically going in for the majority of 2024 from January through September. Then we'll go retrograde back in for a little bit. Won't go back into the sign of Capricorn, but we'll stay in Aquarius Oh, sorry, we'll go back into Capricorn, and then we'll have its full time of going in November of 2024, and we'll be in Aquarius for 20 years, meaning that goes into Pisces, March 10th of 2043. So this kind of shares you a lot about how Pluto goes back and forth between the signs, how it kind of stitches back with the sign just before it switches. And as we know in astrology, whenever one of the outer planets goes into a new sign, there is a lot of change. There's a lot of shift in understanding and experiences to be had. Our most recent experience here in the United States of Pluto and Aquarius, well, actually not here in the United States, of course it was for the world, was on December 2nd, 1778, when Pluto last went into Aquarius. And it was in there for 20 years again back then, and it went until 1798. These are the first 2 decades, of course, right after the United States established its independence from the United States, from England, of course, and was a time of great turmoil, with the American leaders struggling to form a working constitution that would accommodate the multiple viewpoints of people. Pluto and Aquarius, right? Aquarius has a larger viewpoint. It's really concerned with the idea of humanity. We like to say in astrology that Aquarians love humanity but don't tend to like people. It has to do with individuality and the issues of our own individual personality. But when Pluto's there, as we were talking about earlier with the themes of Pluto, taking things away that are no longer useful for us, we can see that there's going to be some ways in which maybe our humanitarian approach is going to be going through a major overhaul during this period. During this earlier period, when it back last time we went through how it affected here in the United States, enslavement, taxation, and states' rights were hot button issues that need to be addressed. We're not talking about enslavement anymore, but we are still talking about understanding and appreciating that Black Lives Matter, and understanding that people need to be treated equally regardless of their race, color, or religion, or sexual orientation, or gender classification or identification. Taxation, of course, is still an issue. You know, when we find that some of these really wealthy individuals in the United States are paying little to no personal income tax, while the rest of us are paying a fairly meaty part and just really trying to still get by. And states' rights, right? Look at what happened with abortion rights recently, where, you know, the Roe versus Wade was overturned, and basically the Supreme Court is basically saying to our elected officials, our Congress and our Senate, create new legislation. Hello, legislative branch. Hello, create new legislation that will ensure the rights of women are taken care of, and letting the states take care of it. And as we can see, the states are now going off and doing things as they want. Some states are a little more conservative, grossly limiting the amount of availability for women who are pregnant and who maybe do not want to carry their child to term for any number of reasons. And that is no longer up to their individual choice in some of these states. These are going to be some of the issues we're going to be dealing with over the next 20 years. Reflective themes. What we like to say in astrology is that while it's the same thing as like when we go and visit a river, you can never visit the same river twice. That's because the water's flowing. That same water that was at the river when you saw it the first time is not even remotely going to be there when you're there the next time. Our minds like to think it's consistent because it's a river and it's there and it's always been there, or maybe it hasn't always been there, whatever. But what we find is that as we go along in these cycles, astrology all is about cycles of the planets making their orbits around the sun, that as they make certain positional relationships to one another through time, that these themes continue to be played out and worked on. And so what I'd like to present today is a few of my observations of what has happened in the past, and, you know, and how these have played out and what we might consider happening with this Pluto and Aquarius theme. So of course, as I talked before, you know, we talked the Pluto Cancer period, which was 1912 through 1937, and then our Pluto in Capricorn, which is an opposition, is from 2008 to 2023. Some of the themes that we saw went on between the two of them, Back at Cancer period, the stock market crash and Great Depression of 1929. And then during our period recently, we've experienced the housing crisis and Great Recession of 2008. We're still not out of it. We're still trying to figure out what to do with how to deal with housing and make it affordable and make it right so that people can actually afford to live in their homes. The Spanish influenza, of course, that happened in 1918, and the COVID pandemic that started in 2020. And I don't think any of us a few years ago would have really realized or understood that there was going to be anything that would affect us on such a great level. Although I have to say, in 2019, all these different centuries, in 2019, we had a talk here for talking about the coming year in 2020, and I actually considered with the Pluto Jupiter issues that were going on then that we might see a large pandemic occur. And I was one of the few astrologers who did. I didn't think it would really come out of how it did. I thought it would come out another way, but I actually was one of the few actually to kind of catch it. So I'm thankful for at least kind of getting a glimpse of it. And I hope that that prescience will continue on as I do this work, and hopefully it benefits you as I do this. And one thing that did not repeat during this time, of course, was the Second World War that started during when Pluto was in Cancer. And so far we're not in there, but there are some activities that are going on that are shockingly similar and are definitely disconcerting. The leader of Iran has Pluto at 29 degrees of Cancer. So his Pluto is being activated. It's by opposition. He's feeling that, terrifying destroyer of worlds sitting right across from his natural Pluto, his natal Pluto, and making him probably feel a little bit uncomfortable. When Pluto went into Scorpio back in 1983, of course, that was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, late 1981, right, when Scorpio squared Leo. 1983, the military drill that nearly sparked nuclear war with the Soviets went on during that time period as well. And here we are dealing with what's going on with Putin. Of course, we have the leader of North Korea, who has Pluto at 1 degree 55 Scorpio. So when that Pluto goes into 0 degrees, I mean, it's already in kind of activating it at this point, but definitely when it hits that 0 degree of Aquarius, he's going to really be feeling that square. It's not going to be feeling comfortable, and it's going to feel very threatening to him, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects what he does with that. And you may have noticed already, when we talked earlier with the leader of Iran, that he's going to be having a Pluto opposition. And you might think, wow, how can a planet that takes 240 years to orbit the sun, how is it possible for it to be doing something that's going to be, how is it possible to have an opposition? Humans don't live 120 years, but Pluto has an elliptical orbit. Here we have Pluto in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, oppositional energy. Those of us who were born anytime after the 1930s, 1920s are likely going to be able to experience Pluto oppositions in our life if we live long enough, if we live into our 80s. Then we get into Pluto in Leo, when in October 8th of 1937, was there until 1956. Then, of course, we're talking about Pluto going into Aquarius in March of 2023, and will be there until 2043. This is an oppositional energy, of course. The Leo generation had big opportunities to go to college, have a home, have a family, buy a home. Climate change, there was no worry about climate change. There was a sunny future. What we have now with the Aquarius generation, astronomical costs, limiting opportunities to go to college, have a family, buy a home. Climate change doesn't really offer a very exciting future to some. There's really a lot of nihilism going on, right? And when you think about it, Aquarius is very, it's airy, it's above it all. It's also the second to the last sign in the zodiac. So there's a bit of a detachment that occurs. So we can see that happening. We have Mr. Putin with Pluto, leader of Russia, with his Pluto at 22 degrees, 43 minutes of Leo. So while it's not going to be hitting an exact square with him, an exact opposition for some time for him, that once that Pluto goes into Aquarius, he's also going to be feeling that energy, that oppositional energy of Pluto sitting there. And it's not going to be a very comfortable feeling for him, I don't believe. So it's really interesting to see what I was interesting to reflect on some of the things that I noticed that happened during the COVID pandemic. And what I saw was the US government actually stepping forward and many social democratic programs that were enacted to help offer life support systems for people, helping them with their rents, helping them with mortgage payments, with gas and electric bills, providing extra payments to help support people in whatever way they can. But in addition to that, we saw astronomical rises in inflation and many people losing their homes, not making enough money. It's going to be another interesting, very scary winter. I think that's going to be happening in Europe, especially in England, with gas prices and things that have been going on with Russia's gas supplies and the embargoes and other things that will be going on there. Uranus and Taurus with Pluto and Aquarius is likely to create new robotic and AI forms. We're seeing just a proliferation of it. Artists, of course, are getting very concerned because they're seeing people go in and pop in a few pictures and having AI, artificial intelligence, create artwork that looks like someone did it. It's going to be very interesting to see how we wind our ways through these things. Of course, more automation means fewer jobs, but if our medicine is advancing and there's more opportunities for people to live longer, what are we going to do to support these individuals who no longer have jobs that are available? These are the questions that we're going to have to be dealing with. Autocratic threats, as I've been showing in the past few slides, are to democracy are ever increasing, especially with these three. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, so we can see that there is going to be a similar theme. I like the usage of Pluto and Saturn together. Alchemically, Saturn represents lead, Pluto represents radioactivity. Saturn is one of the few things, one of the few planets, or one of the few signs that can actually handle Pluto. So I think those do really help because it has to do with boundaries, limits, structure, and authority. We're seeing an increase in conservatism around the world, white, quote, men attempting to regain or maintain control over women's bodies and everything else they think they can get away with. We're dealing with the right, quote, to defend oneself with firearms, even if it means hundreds of innocent people are murdered every year in mass shootings. The privileges of the few and wealthy over the many and the struggling, and the nuclear plutonic threat, which is, a real issue with these three individuals above, here, the leader of Russia, Iran, and North Korea. It's those of us who, have been around for a little bit, and it's just that ever growing sort of a feeling in the back of your neck where there's an existential angst. I think is one of the things that we're going to be feeling more and more as these issues get ironed out. The truth is there is enough for everyone, but we'd have to go through such a massive restructuring the way we consider life, and maybe that's what we're going to have to do, or maybe life is going to present all of us with ways that we're going to have to adjust ourselves in such ways that we begin to understand that the ways in which the media and our politics are teaching us that we are separate and individuated from one another and don't understand one another. The truth is we have far more in common with one another than we do not. That's one of the things that social media kind of shows, but also is obviously creating another distancing within our population as well. And according to the 2022 Varieties of Democracy Annual Report, in 2021, the world experienced the lowest levels of democracy the world has seen in 30 years. In fact, the world has not recorded so few democratizing countries since 1978, with only 15 democratizing countries last year, just 3% of the world population. Moreover, autocratization continues to adapt and evolve, marked by the growing use of polarization, as I was just speaking to, as a political strategy, the continuing rise of misinformation, and the surge in military coups. It's going to be interesting to see what the ramifications of the January 6th commission is going to be doing, and if the Department of Justice will do what is needed to address the grievous issues that occurred on that day, so that there's less of a chance for it happening in the future. Otherwise, it might be happening here in our country as well. So what can we all do? What can we do individually? What can we do collectively? Empower yourself and others. Find ways that you feel good in the things that you do, and find ways to compliment and give gratitude and show ways of encouraging other people to be the best they can be. Slowly build your pantry. Really important. Make sure you've got water on hand. Make sure you've got food on hand. I think we're going to be seeing power disruptions and other things that are going on, and it's just good to be prepared. Know that you have some things in your house that can take care of you for a few days if you can. Be informed and educate yourself. While you may hear something on the news or on the radio from an astrologer, from me, whoever it is, if you are inclined to go online and do some research about it, educate yourself, do what you need to do to make sure what you're allowing into yourself is true, and that you're not just following someone saying things that aren't based in any kind of truth. Self-care, which means the important part is feeding yourself good food, allowing good information to come into you, and being surrounded by people who honor and treat you appropriately is really important. You don't want to be around people who lie to you and cheat from you and steal. You don't want to be watching Fox News and other shows that are not giving the full truth. You don't want to be eating fast food or processed food any more than you can. If you can afford to get organic food, get organic food. If not, then just try and eat as much as healthily as possible, so you take care of yourself. Build your inner observer. Be aware of, when you have a thought, ask whose thought is that? Where does the thought come from? Why is that? Learning to observe and see yourself as one of the many players is an important aspect of maturity and gaining understanding as we get older and more conscious in our lives. Release non-regenerative emotional patterns in relationships. Being around, deciding, if you have issues, you have PTSD issues, or you have OCD issues, or whatever your issues are, that you address whatever it is that is causing them. Not just taking a pill that just masks the top of it and deals with the symptomology, but actually deals with what is creating that in your system. Making sure that you're not around toxic people who are treating you poorly. That can be family members, it can be a spouse, it can be children, it can be friends, co-workers, whatever it is. Learn to have healthier boundaries around the people who do not treat you right. Learn to understand that what comes out of their mouths have nothing to do with you whatsoever, even when they're using the word you. And learn to say no and learn to step away from those harmful relationships. Have a daily practice, whatever that is, meditation, drawing, painting, singing, chanting, hiking, walking, playing with your animals, talking with friends, whatever it is, it recharges your battery. Learn, if you don't know what that is already, work on finding what that is, start building that in. Tai Chi, working out at the gym, swimming. There's so many different ways of having a practice and finding who you are in those moments to yourself. Identify and express love and gratitude. Share that with those people around you. Never be ashamed of sharing love and gratitude. The world needs so much of that. I want to thank you and show gratitude to you for listening to what I'm sharing. I hope what I'm sharing with you, it gives you value, and please pass this on and share this with other people as well. Remember, none of us are alone in this. It's really easy in these dark places where many of us can go, and in the experiences that we have, we can really take on a victim role. And it's really important to kind of sometimes say, hey, you know what? I bet there are other people having a similar experience right now. I'm not meaning this to diminish or to demean your experience, but just to allow yourself to understand that other people are probably going through this too. Many people have gone through this in the past in different ways, and that you will make it through. That's really what I'm meaning to say by it. And it's okay. Find out ways that you can ask for help and receive it. I was very excited. I put vote please. This comes from an earlier talk that I gave on, and I was really excited to see people came out and voted and made their voices heard this time here in the States. And I hopefully, continue to do that and make sure that you are heard. Get involved, volunteer, give what you can. If you can give time, you can give money, you can give objects, whatever it is you can give or do. It'll help you understand and see that there are other people who are less fortunate than you, regardless of what's going on in your life. Don't underestimate your abilities. I should say that like 3 or 4 times. In astrology, what I love, I believe that we are theme finders and cheerleaders. I know in my practice, my big thing is to really reflect back to you your divine light and share with you that in a way so that you can shine that and share it with the world, because that's what you're here to do. So don't underestimate that. Just because other people don't understand what that is, don't allow yourself to be diminished by looking through other people's eyes. Get an astrology reading, human design, or other reading that helps you understand your own personal cosmology and how you look at the world and how you see things. See what is happening and learn what it is that's going on by transit, meaning where the planets are in the sky right now in relationship to your birth chart, and by progression, meaning how your chart unfolds over time. It's always okay to ask for and receive guidance and help. That is why we are here. And one of the great lines I learned from my therapist many years ago, Leslie Nathanson here in Santa Fe, was whenever I have a hard time with someone, I use this. I say, may this person remember their divinity. May they find peace and serenity. And may I forgive myself for all the things I project onto them. Understanding and realizing, as I said earlier, that most things that come out of people's mouths have nothing to do with you. It's the same thing for us. We have to understand what we say many times doesn't have anything to do. We're just dealing with that ourselves. So being aware of that's really important. We project a lot in time, and astrology helps us understand that. I'm available. My website is coremichael.com, coremichael.com, and I can be reached at my email address at michael@michael.com. Wishing you a beautiful year, and look forward to my talks each month. I give a review of what's going on astrologically, so tune in here on my YouTube channel, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Click like, share with your friends, subscribe, and hope to see you soon. Happy New Year, and have a wonderful day.